Welcome back! I have to do some maintenance on my car again and I figured I'd take you along. Nothing major, just a windscreen washer pump replacement, front brake discs and pads, CV boots. I'll try to refurbish the starter motor which keeps not starting the car, check the diff oil, change the automatic transmission fluid and filter, you know, the usual. When I pull this lever I usually hear two things. One is the wipers doing 3 consecutive wipes and a timed fourth one after maybe 20 seconds. And the washer pump, which runs for as long as the lever is pulled. As you can see, there's no water being sprayed and no washer pump sound either. Hopefully it's just a broken pump and not something like broken cables in the guts of the car somewhere. The pump sits behind the wheel arch cover on the front left wheel, so I will jack up that corner and remove the wheel in question for better access. Then I'm removing the wheel arch cover. As you can see, there's a giant hole in it. That's because there's supposed to be a plastic cover under the engine, which normally holds the wheel arch cover out of the way of the wheel, but it's missing on this car. Here you can see the old water pump in its natural habitat. I already pulled off the hose to the jets. There's still water in it, which you can see running out. The new water pump looks basically the same, just, well, newer. I connected it up and did a short dry test just to confirm it is actually working. Don't let it run without water for too long or you risk damaging it. Once function is confirmed, I plug it into the water tank and connect up the hose leading to the jets. Next, it makes sense to test whether it actually pumps water, because it is possible this can be connected up to run backwards, since it's just a DC motor and does not have a fancy plug which prevents reverse polarity. And it works beautifully. So the wheel arch cover can go back on, and then the wheel. Don't forget to place your lives in the hands of the world's cheapest torque wrench. If you watched my first few car videos, you might remember I did some dodgy emergency fixes like putting copper paste on the brake's floating pins, leaving on asymmetrically worn pads and discs, and other highlights. Now it is time to correct some past mistakes with shiny new parts. And maybe make some new mistakes. First, I am taking out the old floating pins in the mounting brackets, which I had set in with old rubber bellows and copper paste because I didn't have 2 brackets worth of repair kits. Because I am a very organized person, I thought I'd accidentally only ordered 1 set of guide pins, so I just replaced the worst ones in each bracket first. But then I had another look and I found the other set, which enabled me to not do a terrible job for a change, and now all the guide pins can be replaced with shiny new ones and shiny new correct grease and bellows. Now the new brake discs, repaired caliper mounting brackets and of course new brake pads can be installed on the car. So the disc goes on the hub. I'm fixing it in place with some wheel bolts. Then the mounting bracket goes on the steering knuckle behind the disc. Because the new brakes are thicker than the old worn ones, the piston in the brake caliper has to be reset. For this you can just use your thumbs if you are murderously strong, but normally you would use a piston resetting tool. I bought one and just had to make an adapter for the larger piston diameter, as the pistons in the front brakes are hollow and the tool is not long enough to reach the bottom. That's what she said. Trying to reset the piston while holding onto the caliper and the tool at the same time turned out to be quite difficult. The solution I found was to fix the caliper to one mounting pin and then use the tool. Works like a charm. Now the pads can go in. And then the bolts to both pins are fastened properly. The manual of the brakes, yes, I read manuals sometimes, said to check for runout. I have a dodgy broken magnet base which is placed on a grimy damper housing tube with a not very rigid arm and a similarly cheap and half decapitated dial indicator on it. Yay! The measured runout is just around the tolerance given, but I attribute at least 50% of it to the measurement setup, as well as the fact that I only used 2 out of 4 bolts to fix the brake disc in place. Professionalism at its best. We'll see if it makes trouble during the test drive later, but I expect it will be just fine. So this is done. Now I'll do up the other side, and I'm leaving the wheel off for what comes next. Next I have to replace the rubber boots, bellows or whatever you want to call them, which protect the outer constant velocity joints from the environment and, almost more importantly, protect the environment from the grease in the constant velocity joints. Which means exchange them before they tear to pieces. Please, Mother Nature thanks you. What are they for, you ask? Well, they connect the gearbox's output shafts to the wheels and facilitate that you can steer left and right while keeping the speed and torque delivered to each wheel even, regardless of steering angle and suspension travel. The inner joints I will leave untouched. The rubber doesn't look porous yet, and while I can find boots which might fit, the joints themselves seem to be impossible to find anywhere, so while the bellows are good, I do not really want to risk contamination of the joints. I suspect they might not be sold anymore because these small-engined automatics were sold in very small numbers, at least domestically. Why buy a small engine for better economy and then pay extra money for an automatic gearbox, which is less economical? I know that automatics could cost quite a bit more than their manual equivalents back then. It was a comfort option you only paid for when you really wanted it. Anyhow, I digress. Here you see me carefully opening up the steel band holding the boot in place with a saw. Then it is important to clean up the outer parts of the joint and boot to make sure no dirt or loose rust crumbles into the joint during disassembly or reassembly. You can skip this if you are putting on a completely new joint. Removing the outer joints, which are held on the spline shaft with a kind of spring clip, can be achieved by turning in the hub bolt all the way until it hits the drive shaft. Keep ratcheting a bit further and the joint gets pulled free of its spring clip. Then the joint can just be pulled off the rest of the way by hand. Here's the outer joint with the boot removed. You might think the grease looks dirty and in need of replacing, but this is what CV joint grease always looks like, because it's got graphite in it. I am just wiping the excess grease off the joint and spline shaft with a clean paper towel. Taking the joint apart for cleaning is not recommended, as you likely won't be able to put it back together, and it actually comes apart quite easily when you least expect it, so be a bit careful. If the joint has been contaminated by dirt because the boot was torn or because some dirt got in during the disassembly process, I recommend exchanging the entire joint from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. While I'm here, I am taking some of the rust flakes off the drive shaft. Not all of them, mind you. I don't have that much time. Note how the greased joint is not lying right next to me while brushing the rust. Now, onto the reassembly. First I put the boot back on the shaft. I'm using some CV joint grease to lubricate the inner seal lip of the boot so it slides over the shaft better. CV joint boots are commonly secured in place with these clamped steel bands which are not intended to be reused. So make sure you have spares on hand if you're taking them off. Make sure you use appropriate clamping tools, which I am not. There's these pliers, which I have, and then there's a tool with a screw, which the manual says has to be used here. With the steel bands clamped, this drive shaft is ready to go. But wait, there's more. Of the same. So naturally, I also did the other drive shaft. And when I was done and proudly presenting my work to the camera, I realized I forgot to put the spring washer and spacer in, which prevent the joint from sliding on the spline shaft like so and wearing it. Luckily I had spare band clamps from the inner boots, which I didn't end up using, and after another round of fun, I finally got the job done. Make sure you pay attention to what you're doing, especially if the entire world is your witness. Represented here by my 13 subscribers. Anyway, that's it for this chapter. Thank you for watching and see you around.